So that's what we want to think about. And I'm going to give you a population. Why do I like rabbits so much as an example? Because they're easy for me to draw. I don't draw them well, but I don't really care. There's a rabbit. It's a terrible rabbit. I'm making no illusions otherwise. It's an awful rabbit. That population of rabbits, what is a population? This is what we have to think back to. What's a population? God, that's a terrible rabbit. All the members of a single species living in one area that are capable of interbreeding with one another. So I'm going to shrink this rabbit. That is an incredibly crabby-looking rabbit. And I'm going to copy this rabbit a bunch of times. Now, it's entirely possible that this whole area, let's say that there's some great and mighty river across which the rabbits cannot swim. A geographic barrier. So this group of rabbits is fairly isolated. They're going to form a population. These rabbits are they're all the same species. They're capable of interbreeding. So meaning that their reproductive cycles line up, their genitals fit, they're actually attracted to one another. They produce functional offspring. They are capable of reproducing. We don't know how big this area is. This could be an area the size of Columbiana County. This could be an area the size of the village of Rogers. We don't know. Maybe it's an isolated population of rabbits living on the grounds of the Rogers auction. It's possible. Maybe no rabbits cross 154. If I was a rabbit, I would not cross 154 looking for a date. You'd be much more likely to end up dead. So is it possible that something like Route 7 and 154 form barriers for rabbits? Yeah, it is. Do they cross? Yeah, every now and then I see one smushed on the road. But it may form a barrier. So we've got this population. But what if within this population, they still tend to sort of breed with those who are closest to them? It's quite possible that, maybe rabbits from the north end of the auction grounds never see rabbits from the south end of the auction grounds. Maybe there's no north-south dating or east-west dating. I guess east-west is the longer axis if we're thinking about the auction grounds. So is it possible that within this population you have smaller groups who typically breed only with one another? Yeah, it is. Are they all still a population? Yeah. Now, typically bunnies from this region bunnies from this region don't often breed with bunnies outside their region, but there might be some overlap, there might be some fuzzy boundaries. What do you think might start to happen over generations? We're thinking right now just in terms of appearance. Do you think it's possible that over generations the bunnies in this area would all start to look more alike? And the bunnies in this area would all start to look more alike? And the bunnies in this area would all start to look more alike? Could there be some fuzziness on the edges? Sure. Yeah, there could definitely be fuzzy edges where, sometimes this one breeds over into that area versus another area. But we might start to see sort of distinct subgroups. Are they all still capable of interbreeding? Yeah. If a rabbit from, let me shrink this tip down. If a rabbit from here becomes frightened and ends up over here, could it breed with the rabbits it finds? Yeah. But on the whole, over many generations, if we assume that they're still engaging in mostly proximity mating, it's possible that we're going to start to see, we can think of them as like regional subtypes. Within this population of rabbits, we tend to find, that's interesting. on the west side of the auction grounds, we tend to see rabbits with longer ears. There's no good reason for it. They just have been all interbreeding for so many generations. We don't tend to see many of those on the west end or east end of the fairgrounds, auction grounds. Jeez Louise. There's still a population. They're still all capable of interbreeding. But we can start to see these sort of regional types develop. Can you think of any real-life examples of this? I'll give you a few minutes to talk about it at your table. So in this case, if we have groups of tortoises, torti, on these islands, whoops, are they still a population?
Just on one island? Or no, they're not.
No, they're not a population. Why aren't they a population?
Because they're separate.
Yeah. The funny thing is Galapagos tortoises are not good swimmers. Can this tortoise mate with this tortoise?
No.
No. There's no tortoise love happening. Doesn't matter. Now, on one island, you definitely can have mating. So we would tend to think of each island would have its own population of tortoises. Over time, you mentioned the word subspecies. We're going to talk about speciation, the point at which they cease to be one species and they actually diverge. Okay, let's think about another. I don't think this one works. Sorry, guys. Let's think about another species in which you might see regional subtypes. Boy, nobody's jumping on the most obvious one.
Rabbits.
No. You could definitely see regional subtypes in rabbits. But that's not the obvious one that I think you're all missing.
I said that. So if it's right.
And yeah, actually, so the word used was race. Race is kind of a fiction that we use. You can talk about, which is fine. It's a cultural and social fiction that we use. Genetically, there's no basis for the concept. But yeah, they're regional subtypes. So regional subtypes related to skin color, hair color, eye color. This young lady comes up in a search for Irish female. Is she Irish? I don't know. Google can't lie, right? The British Isles in general do have a higher proportion of redheaded individuals as a percentage of population than most other parts of the globe. Scotland, Wales, Ireland, UK. So, yeah, could she be Irish? Sure. Could she have been born in Pennsylvania? Sure. Do we know where her ancestors came from? Nope. This young lady comes up when I put in a search for Italian female. And we see hair color and eye color and skin tones that we associate with a particular region of a particular continent. This young lady comes up on a search for Kenyan female. So we associate her with that, oh boy, my African geography is terrible. West Africa? Definitely sub-Saharan, that's below the Sahara Desert. West sub-Saharan Africa, I think. It could be east. I know it's sub-Saharan. Anyway, what we think of as very African. This young lady comes up on a South Asian female search. So Indian subcontinent. What? Yeah, Indian subcontinent is also called South Asia. We used to talk about India, and therefore we would talk about Indians. The more common term these days is South Asian, which makes more sense because in this country, of course, there's confusion over Native Americans versus South Asian Indians. And using South Asian versus Native American clears it all up since Indian was a misprint anyway, as it were. These are regional subtypes. Now, can we shuffle our regional subtypes? Absolutely. And we end up with all sorts of wonderful hybrid vigor. We'll talk more about hybrids a little later. We end up with interesting combinations of traits that we might not have gotten had we kept those little regional subtype groups. There's another interesting one. Who here has ever watched Stray Dogs? Okay. How many of you have seen a stray dog? When I was a kid, we had neighbors who had sort of a pack of, well, their life wasn't all together. And they had a lot of dogs, and the dogs kind of ran free and reproduced freely. And so there was sort of a population of wild dogs in my neighborhood that all sort of originated from this one family. And then it was complicated. But We ended up with sort of a regional subtype based on the founding effect of the founding population of their dogs, because I think they had like upwards of 20 dogs at their house, which then just ran. Stray dogs have been observed to have regional subtypes. So here's a dog, a mutt, a combination of traits. When I lived in Youngstown, there were tons of just stray wild dogs with nobody to care for them. I lived on the north side near campus. And there was a very distinctive north side type of stray dog. I could swear to you that in any given week I saw 30 dogs, different dogs, but that all had a similar set of features. The north side strays in my neighborhood at that point in time all had these sort of medium shaggy coats. They were all like black and tan and white. We never saw yellow-looking dogs. We didn't see anything that looked like a beagle. They all looked like they had come generations ago from the same founders. Could there have been a founder effect there? Yeah. Were they getting new genetic material in? Sure. People dump dogs or dogs would wander in. But overall, over the, probably 7 years I lived on the north side, that regional subtype of stray dog stayed remarkably consistent. What was even more interesting was that I had friends on the south side and they had a different regional subtype of stray dog. All the stray dogs in their neighborhood looked different than all the stray dogs in my neighborhood. It's a regional subtype. It's proximity mating. Those stray dogs are not hoofing it across a bridge, across a river, through downtown, over a highway to mate. You know who they're going to mate with? The dog in the next yard, the dog on the next block. They're going to mate nearby. And so with that kind of proximity mating, you can develop these regional subtypes. Does that mean that the population changes over time? Yeah. The regional subtypes might not change a whole lot. The regional subtypes might be relatively stable. But if we consider this whole big group as the population, is the distribution of traits in the population shifting? Yeah. Each little regional subtype may be reinforcing their own traits. So we can see the development of regional subtypes because of proximity mating. Now, let's talk about the next question. Okay, so the next question, if all members of a population tend to seek out mates that look like them, would you expect to see an increase in diversity of appearance or a decrease in a diversity of appearance over many generations? Why? Why not? Provide examples. I think most of you understand this. If everybody is looking for partners that look just like them, over time, we tend to see this sort of homogenization where we have, over the long term, if everybody's mating with organisms that look just like them, what happens to diversity? Does it change much? I don't know that it does. When I say these are critical thinking, I literally mean I want you to think this through. I don't know if it changes much. Might you just get sort of reinforcement of subgroups within a population where you continue to have red bunnies and purple bunnies and you never get any magenta bunnies? I think you could make an argument that it either decreases diversity because eventually, because then you would be saying you would end up with a relatively homogeneous group, same group. It might just sort of preserve the level of diversity you've got. These are, when I say there's not necessarily a single right answer for this, I mean it. I'm thinking this through too, but I want to think about how does a population change over many, many generations if all you're seeing is a sort of mating? Has anybody studied it? I don't know. This is one of those big questions. My initial guess would be that you would probably just about preserve the level of diversity that you've got, but it would probably depend on how dissimilar the members of the population were. How different are they? Is it as different as red and purple bunnies, or is it more subtle? I don't know. Look at that sexy bird. That's what we're talking about here. Sexual selection is about what mates find attractive. And there are subcategories, and there are different trends that you tend to see, whether the females choose or the males choose. Is there a cost to him to growing that giant tail? Yeah, what is it? Energy. I mean, number one, he's producing these enormous feathers. Feathers are largely made of protein. Did you know that? They're almost totally nitrogenous. If you put feathers in your compost pile, it ups your nitrogen content significantly. Feathers are mostly protein. If you had to, I suppose you could eat them. Ooh. But let's not think about that too much. Yeah, I know. Ooh. Why did I even say that? There's a cost. All the protein that he used to make those feathers, he had to consume. He had to find more food. It takes calories to grow that kind of tail. What's the other cost? Do you think that, okay, you may not be familiar with peacocks. Are you familiar with chickens? Pigeons? Any kind of birds you've ever seen in your life? You've never seen a bird in your life? Emily, I'm assigning you homework. Okay, I know a few other people who are in that same boat. It's okay. I'm not going to ask you to get near a bird. Just want you to think about them, if that's okay. Are birds like this typically predator species or prey species? Oh yeah, they're prey. Lots of things would like to chomp on a delicious chicken, turkey, peahen, peafowl, peacock. Any other drawback you can think of to that big, bright, beautiful tail? Hey ladies, I'm right here! If you're a prey species, is that a good idea? You okay? That's what his tail is saying. His tail is a giant lit up billboard. Hello, ladies! He is like lit on fire showing up. Is there a disadvantage to that if you're a prey species? Hello, predators! I'm right here! Could that be a problem? Yeah, it could. So what balancing game is being played here? Sexy versus lunch. That big, bright, beautiful tail may be dead sexy to female peafowl, to peahens, but it's also a pretty good attractant to anything that would like to eat him. Oh, I see. That's a problem. Let's think about another species that's often cited as an example of sexual selection, and I don't have a picture, unfortunately, but maybe you've seen one. Look at the rack on that guy. Yes, okay, everybody's a critic. Good grief. There, are you happy now?
It was still not connected.
It's a deer. It's a big, sexy deer with a huge rack. Look at the rack on that guy. Wow. Why is this so sexy to female deer? He's got a big rack. Why is a big rack sexy? He's not hanging coats on it. Strong. Okay. What can he do with that big rack? Fight other bucks. And will he fight other bucks? Yes, probably. So, you know, he who wins the competition of the big head-butting racks may in fact get to impregnate the doe. Woohoo! He lives to pass on his genes. Is there a drawback to that giant rack? Yes. What? Name me one.
Hunters.
Okay. In the current environment, what is the main predator species on whitetails? Us. Who also finds big racks really attractive, but not for any of the same reasons? Humans. My neighbor. Probably not. A bear would actually probably avoid a deer with a big rack in an area. Bears are omnivorous. They are opportunistic carnivores. So a bear typically will not go at an adult deer, even an adult doe. They will sometimes eat fawns left unguarded because they're easy. It's an easy meal. But a full-grown bear would not take on a full-grown buck in general. He is not an easy thing to take on. Okay, so humans also find these racks attractive. He needs more calories. I don't know if there's any effect. I'm thinking like in a little tiny minutia. Does a little tiny like 3-point buck move faster than a 10-point buck? I don't know. You know, is it awkward? Are you less maneuverable when you've got a giant clothes rack hanging off the top of your head? I don't know. Can you imagine running around with that thing on your head? Yeah, exactly. I mean, you'd be hitting branches all the time. You know, do you give up something in speed and maneuverability to grow that enormous rack? Are you then more likely to be killed or die because of it? So, is there a downside to what does find sexy? There may be. Is there a downside to what female peafowl finds sexy? Yeah, there may be. You know, there are a lot of species in which sexual selection sort of works opposite natural selection. So maybe having that big bright tail doesn't make you the fittest peafowl in terms of survival. Sure makes you sexy. What's the compromise that these guys have specifically? They fold their tail up. They're not always that visible. If you ever get a chance to see, hopefully we will get to go to the zoo in the spring, and if we do get to go to the zoo, hopefully you will get to see peacocks. Most zoos have at least some peacocks, and you'll see that the males walk around most of the time with that tail on the ground, just dragging behind them, lowered. When they get a little feisty, then you'll see them put that tail up and shake, 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 shake. Has anybody here spent any time around turkeys? Okay, either in the woods or on farms. Male turkeys also have a big display tail, a big fan tail, which they will shake in the presence of intruders. I used to raise turkeys, and if somebody who they had never seen before came down around the turkey pens, you would suddenly, all their heads would turn red, all the fans would come up, and they would be making all kinds of crazy noises that I can't replicate, and shaking their tails, and being very defensive and very threatening, which apparently is probably also not only something that'll drive off a predator, maybe, ooh, that thing's really big, it makes crazy noises, maybe I shouldn't eat it, but also there's an element of protecting the females, protecting the harem. So, okay, now,